This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1.
Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between an assistant at a health club and a man who wants to join the club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5.
Hi, can I help you?
Hello. Yes, is your club taking on new members at the moment?
Oh, yes. We're always interested in taking on new members. Just give me a moment and I'll get an application form. Right, here we are. So, let's start with your name.
It's Harry.
Okay. And your surname?
It's Simons.
Is that like Simon with an S?
No, it's Symonds. Most people find it rather difficult to spell.
I see. It has a silent D. I guess a lot of people miss that. Now, let me see. Can you tell me when you were born?
Yes, certainly. The 11th of December.
Thanks. And the year?
1996.
Okay, good. Now, are you thinking of becoming a full-time member?
Probably not. What kind of memberships do you have?
Well, we also have off-peak membership, which is between 9 and 12 in the morning and 2 and 5 in the afternoon. And then we do have a weekend membership.
So a weekend membership is just Saturday and Sunday?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Well, that's not going to work for me. It looks like I'll have to be full-time. I'm afraid off-peak membership won't do, as I'm not free at those times, and I don't just want to be restricted to weekends.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. Right, we have several facilities at the club, including a gym, a swimming pool, tennis and squash courts. What activities are you planning on doing?
Well, do you have badminton?
Yes, we do.
And table tennis?
I'm afraid not. Well, not at the moment, anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm also very keen on swimming, so I'm glad you have a pool. I'll certainly be doing a lot of that.
Okay, I've got that. Will you be using the gym?
No, I'm not interested in that.
Okay. So just let me work out what the cost will be. Yes, that comes to £450 for the year. You can choose to pay annually for the full year or monthly. It's up to you.
Oh, I'd prefer to pay regularly in small amounts, rather than have a large amount to pay in one go, if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine. Right, I've got the most important details for now.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you will have some time to look at the questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
So, I'd just like to ask you a few questions about your lifestyle, if that's okay with you.
Yes, that's fine.
Do you do any regular exercise at the moment?
Yes, I do a bit.
Good. And what do you do?
Well, every few days I go jogging.
Yes, that's good. How long do you go for?
Well, it varies. I guess it depends on how energetic I'm feeling.
Yes, of course. Every little bit helps. Do you have any injuries at the moment?
Well, I did break a bone in my foot playing football a long time ago, but that's all healed up now. But in the last few days, I've realised I have a bad ankle. I think I must have injured it last week, and it's a bit sore now. But apart from that, I'm fine.
Right. I guess you might need to rest it for a few days to let it recover.
Yes, I will.
So, let me just ask you what you want to achieve by joining the club. Do you have any targets or goals?
Well, I suppose my main aim is to build up my fitness level. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yes, that's fine. All the activities you're going to be doing should certainly help you with that.
Okay.
And could you tell me what you do for a living?
Well, I was a student up until recently.
Okay. So what are you doing at the moment?
Well, I'm a charity worker.
Oh, that's fine. I'll write that down. Okay, nearly done. One last question. Can I ask how you heard about the club? Did you see it advertised or did you go to our website, for example?
Well, I've been looking for a health club for a while, and I asked my friends for suggestions, but they weren't much help. And then I was listening to the radio, and your club was mentioned. So I thought, I'll go along and see what it's like.
Great. Well, we look forward to having you as a member.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1.
Part 2.
You will hear a man called Dan Pearman talking on the radio about Pedal Power, a UK charity which sends bicycles to people in developing countries. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
My name's Dan Pearman, and I'd like to talk about the work of Pedal Power, a small charity based mainly in the UK. I'll be giving our contact details at the end, if anyone would like to find out more about how to support us. But first, how the charity began. I got the idea of exporting bicycles to developing countries while I was in Ecuador. I went there in 1993, just after graduating from university. After 3 years of studying, I wanted adventure. I loved travelling, so I decided to join a voluntary organisation and was sent to Ecuador to carry out land surveys. The project came to an end after 5 years, and when I returned to the UK in 1998, I started planning Pedal Power. Where I lived in Ecuador was a very rural area. My neighbour had the only bicycle in the village, whereas everyone else walked everywhere. My neighbour's business was unusually successful, and for years I couldn't understand why. Then I realised having a bike meant he could get where he wanted to go without much trouble. Other local carpenters could only accept jobs in a 3-kilometre radius, so no matter how skilled they were, they could never do as many jobs as my neighbour. At Pedal Power, we collect second-hand bikes in the UK and send them to some of the poorest regions in the world. When we distribute bikes overseas, we don't give them away for free. We'd like to, but long-term that doesn't really help the local economy. The demand for bikes is enormous, which makes them very expensive locally. So we sell them for 5% of the normal price. But in order to continue operating, we need to have a constant supply of bikes which we send out every 6 months. One example of a town that's received bicycles from Pedal Power is Rivas. It was the first place I sent a full container of bicycles to. Most people there now own a bicycle. The local economy has developed so much you wouldn't recognise it as the same place. In fact, there are more bikes than on the streets of Amsterdam, if you've ever been there. But Pedal Power still needs your help. You may have read about some of our recent problems in the British media. In August 2000, we simply ran out of money. We had containers of bikes ready to send, but no money to pay the bills. It was a terrible situation. We managed to ensure the bikes went out on time, but the other problems carried on for several months.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Fortunately, in October 2001, we won an Enterprise Award, which helped us enormously. We invested 15 of the £75,000 prize money to help secure our future. Winning the award helped raise our profile, and the money enabled us to pay all our shipping costs, which represent our greatest expense. Pedal Power changes lives. When someone gets a bicycle from us, they see a 14% increase in their income. We're currently looking to invest in computers so that our office staff can do an even better job. Because of our work, people in a number of countries now have a better standard of living. So far, we've provided 46,000 people with bikes. But we'd like to send more, at least 50,000 by the end of the year. Now, there are many ways in which you can support the work of Pedal Power, not just by taking a bike to a collection in your area. I should also like to say, if you do have a bike to donate, it doesn't matter what condition it's in. If we can't repair it, we'll strip it down for spare parts. Of course, to do that we always need tools, which are expensive to buy, so we welcome any that you can give. Also, you could help by contacting the voluntary staff at our offices. They'll be able to suggest activities you could organise to bring in funds for us. People do all kinds of things, including, of course, sponsored bike rides. Also, we're always interested to hear of other places that would benefit from receiving a consignment of bikes, and welcome suggestions from people who've been to developing regions on their travels. We hope that by talking on radio programmes like this, we will be able to raise public awareness, which will lead to government organisations also giving us regular financial support, something that we really need. If you'd like some more information about where to donate an old bicycle or offer help in other ways, please contact us on 019.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2.
Part 3.
You will hear a university tutor and a new student called Paul discussing Paul's work experience and Latin American Studies course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26. I've been reading your personal statement, Paul. First, let's talk about your work experience in South America. What took you there? Was it to gain more fluency in Spanish?
Well, as I'm combining Spanish with Latin American studies, my main idea was to find out more about the way people lived there. My spoken Spanish was already pretty good, in fact.
So you weren't too worried about language barriers?
No. In fact, I ended up teaching English there, although that wasn't my original choice of work.
I see. How did you find out about all this?
I found an agency that runs all kinds of voluntary projects in South America.
What kind of work?
Well, there were several possibilities.
You mean construction, engineering work?
Yes, getting involved in building projects was an option. Then there was tourism, taking tourists for walks around the volcanoes, which I actually chose to do, and then there was work with local farmers.
But you didn't continue with that project. Why not?
Because I never really knew whether I'd be needed or not. I'd thought it might be difficult physically, but I was certainly fit enough. Now, I wanted to do something that had more of a proper structure to it, I suppose. I get demotivated otherwise.
What do you think you learned from your experience? It must have been a great opportunity to examine community life.
Yes, but it was difficult at first to be accepted by the locals. It was a very remote village, and some of them were reluctant to speak to me, although they were always interested in my clothes and how much I had to pay for them.
Well, that's understandable.
Yes, but things soon improved. What struck me was that when people became more comfortable with me and less suspicious, we really connected with each other in a meaningful way.
You made good friends?
Yes, with two of the families in particular.
Good. What about management? Did you have a project manager?
Yes, and he gave me lots of advice and guidance.
And was he good at managing too?
That wasn't his strong point. I think he was often more interested in the academic side of things than filing reports. He was a bit of a dreamer.
And did you have a contract?
I had to stay for a minimum of 3 months. My parents were surprised when I asked to stay longer, 6 months in the end. I was so happy there.
And did anything on the administration side of things surprise you? What was the food and lodging like?
Simple, but there was plenty to eat, and I only paid $7 a day for that, which was amazing, really. And they gave me all the equipment I needed, even a laptop.
You didn't expect that then?
No.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing more. Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30. But now let's look at these modules. You'll need to start thinking about which ones you'll definitely want to study. The first one here is Gender Studies in Latin America. It looks at how gender analysis is reconfiguring civil society in Latin America. Women are increasingly occupying positions in government and in other elected leadership positions in Latin America. I think you'd find it interesting.
If it was to do with people in the villages rather than those in the public sphere, I would.
OK. What about second language acquisition?
Do you think I'd find that useful?
Well, you've had some practical experience in the field. I think it would be.
I hadn't thought about that. I'll put that down as a definite then.
OK. What about Indigenous women's lives? That sounds appropriate.
I thought so too, but I looked at last year's exam questions and that changed my mind.
Don't judge the value of the course on that. Maybe talk to some other students first, and we can talk about it again later.
OK.
Yes, and lastly, will you sign up for Portuguese lessons?
My Spanish is good, so would I find that module easy?
Not necessarily. Some people find that Spanish interferes with learning Portuguese, getting the accent right too. It's quite different in a lot of ways.
Well, I'd much sooner do something else then.
All right. Now, what we need to do is make a...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
Part 4.
You will hear an introduction about an eco-friendly building called the Gherkin. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I'd like to tell you about how UK architects are playing their part to address the issue of global warming. You have seen many of these iconic buildings while going about your everyday life, but you may not know how they are affecting your tomorrow. In 2003, construction was completed on the famous Swiss rebuilding, or more informally called the Gherkin, a true masterpiece commissioned by the law offices of Foster & Partners. This is not the first ambitious endeavour of the firm. They are renowned for their various philanthropic environmental efforts. The Gherkin, with its cutting-edge green initiative and sharp design, is gaining recognition as an icon in modern architecture. You can pick it out of the London skyline by its unorthodox cigar shape. While its appearance is the obvious attribute at which to marvel, there is far more to this building than meets the eye. And let's face it, there's a lot about this building that meets the eye. The building helps reduce the city's carbon footprint in a number of ways. Just a quick note, in case you're not familiar with the term carbon footprint, get used to it. It's a buzzword you'll hear relentlessly to talk about reducing emissions. Think of it as the amount of harmful greenhouse gases that are given off into the environment by a single person, organization, or product. So going back to the Gherkin building, perhaps the most obvious as well as the most significant eco-friendly feature is the glass windows, which allow light to pass through the building, both reducing heating costs and brightening up the workspace. The ingenuity behind the various eco-friendly aspects of the Gherkin has seen its fair share of publicity, both from serious and silly sources. In a recent April Fool's Day edition, one e-publication printed a story detailing plans to replace 50% of the current exterior with grass, which would not only make large steps in the name of sustainability, but also give the building the green hue that would truly earn it the nickname of the Gherkin. The only drawback is, as you may have guessed, that this story was an April Fool's Day joke and completely made up. In all seriousness, though, the building is setting a new standard of design that other architects and city planners just cannot ignore. The building's bold and cost-efficient design has won a number of architecture awards, including the Stirling Prize, the London Region Award, and the Empress Skyscraper Award, among others. The design comfortably accommodates a large number of offices, while keeping maintenance and operation costs down, striking a superb balance between nature and the workplace. Nature is well and good, as long as the weather is nice outside. Given London's notoriously bad weather, the architects knew they must devise a quality temperature regulation system, and that they did. A special system designed to reduce the building's reliance on air conditioning was devised that cuts consumption in half compared to standard office buildings. There are atria that link each floor vertically to one another, forming spiraling spaces up the entire building. They serve not just as social common spaces, but also act as the building's lungs, distributing clean air from the opening panels in the facade through the entire building. The building isn't all business though. It has its fair share of fun as well. At the very top, a club room offers a picturesque entertainment spot for company functions, private parties, etc., with a breathtaking panoramic view of the city. The creation of such an innovative structure has many wondering what the future of urban planning and architecture may be. Well, if the other projects currently commissioned by Foster & Partners are any indication, the entire city constructed with similarly eco-friendly buildings is not far in the distance. The Masdar City development aims to create a desert city that produces zero waste and removes as much carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as it puts in, a huge feat in protecting our Earth. The Gherkin is a truly impressive feat, yet it is not the only one worth noting. Now to move on to another green initiative, I'll tell you about the Eden Foundation building found in Cornwall.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.